Welcome to Everyday Buddhism, making every day better by applying the proven tools found in Buddhist concepts. Welcome to episode 25 of Everyday Buddhism, making every day better. I'm excited to share the fourth in a series of episodes talking with the Buddhist teachers that not only educated me in the Dharma, but shaped my life for the better. One of my first teachers said everyone is your teacher because everyone is a Buddha. And that is true, but there are some teachers who come into your life and have a major influence on you. I'm thrilled to have another one of my teachers, Reverend Satya Robyn, a priest in the Amida Order, joining me for this episode where we talk about how the whole of messy humanity is met by the divine when we relax our sense of control and know that life accepts us just as we are. Those are Satya's beautiful words. I know you'll delight in Satya's gorgeous descriptive ways of communicating the heart and soul of spiritual practice, Buddhism, Pureland Buddhism, Refuge, and yes, the F word, faith. So here we are at episode 25 of Everyday Buddhism, making every day better. And the fourth in a series of episodes where I will talk with my teachers that helped shape my life as a Buddhist practitioner and a better person. I think like Greg Creech a couple of episodes ago, I may be here surprising Satya here that I consider her a teacher. Never told her point blank, but maybe hinted around a few times. So in this episode, I am talking with Satya Robyn. Satya is a shortened version of her full Buddhist name, Satyavani, which means eloquent communicator of the truth. I just found that out today in researching you. I first virtually met Satya as a student of David Brazier Sensei's books and teachings, and as a student of the Vow 22 program through the Amida Academy of Zen Therapy, and as a friend of the Amida Order. I don't even know if Vow 22 still exists, but hey, there we go. There's a plug. I went on to explore her Small Stones writing programs and learned so much from her as not just a Buddhist teacher, but a writer. A writer who helps you stop and look at things around you and turn that into a Buddhist practice. And I found that her Buddhist name, Eloquent Communicator of the Truth, to be spot on. Actually, we were just talking about that in our little chat prior, where she can be painfully honest in her writing, and I think you will enjoy that. Satya is, for people who don't know who you are, Satya is a Buddhist priest who runs a Pureland Buddhist temple associated with the Amida Order in Malvern in the UK, and she runs it with her husband, Kaspa. She's also a psychotherapist in private practice and a successful author of both fiction and nonfiction. I don't know how she does it all, but she and her husband, Kaspa, also used to run Writing Our Way Home, offering mindful writing courses. I don't think they do that anymore, but it was one of the things that I so enjoyed. But I have a sneaking suspicion if you ask Satya who she is, I suspect her answer would be that she's an ordinary person. In fact, she would probably answer that she isn't an ordinary foolish person. So in the introduction to her latest and just released book, plug, Coming Home, Refuge in Pureland Buddhism, she puts it this way, quote, I am an ever-shifting mixture of light and dark, deluded and enlightened, and I know that I am acceptable, just as I am, and that you are also a mix of awful and wonderful, and you are also illuminated by the light of love. So I think that from Satya is a wonderful way to introduce both her and Pureland Buddhism. So welcome, Satya, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much, Wendy. What a wonderful introduction. I can't say anything that's going to top that. Might as well stop now.
We're gonna have a lot of time to fill then, Satya, because I'm going to ask a couple questions and then you're up. So, all right. So, how would you answer the question, "Who are you?" I just did it for you through the words of yours. You're running so many things. You know, a Buddhist priest, running a temple, a psychotherapist, an author. People who don't know, I know her as a Facebook friend. I know she also looks after a vegetable garden and cats and bunnies and soon to be a new puppy. So I think she's in for it. So who are you, Satya?
Yeah, start with a small question.
Yeah, I don't do anything easy. I don't.
So yeah, it's an interesting question, isn't it? And I think that there are themes in the various things that I do. So I once there's a poet in England called Selina Hill, and I went on one of her courses once, and she said that living as a poet, one of the byproducts of living as a poet is poems. That the poems kind of just sort of slough off you like skin as a result of being in relationship with the world in a particular way. And so I guess that one of the ways of looking at all the different things that I do is that they're all kind of a byproduct of some central koan, I guess, something that I've brought to this world that needs to be investigated. There's a Buddhist word, I think it's bhavanga. I don't know if you've heard of bhavanga. Dharmavidya, David Brazier talks about our bhavanga, and that it's like something that we enter the world with, and everything that we do revolves around it somehow, trying to work something out, work something through. And I would have said a while ago that my bhavanga, my central koan, was something about being able to tell the truth. So in my books, the novels are often about people who are finding a way of speaking something that hasn't found a space to be heard. As a therapist, I'm helping my clients to find their own truth and articulate it, or bring it into the world. As a Buddhist priest, the same. But I think that I'd probably give you a different answer now, which is more about coming into relationship with the divine, I think.
Wow.
And that's my job as little me, and also hopefully I can help others to do that in their own way. Whatever the divine is for them. You know, it might be the Buddha, it might be something entirely different, it might be nature. So that's something that remains important, and there's a thread that runs through.
You know, that's interesting, because I think that's what, for those of you who run out and get Satya's book, I think that's what you'll find. There is it's sort of I love this kind of thing as sort of a hack poet myself, is the juxtaposition of like the real earthy, goofy, awful stuff and the divine. And Satya has a wonderful way of kind of interweaving all those, so much so that it's like, sometimes there's no transition. And I think that puts people off who are very linear, and you know what I mean? It's like, not that they put them off. I'm not saying people are put off by your writing. I'm saying it can be confusing to people who don't have that sense of, okay, I'm just gonna, it's like, I had a friend, I introduced a book to her. It was The Light Inside the Dark. You know the book by John Tarrant.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
one of my favorite books of all time. And I introduced it to a friend who was leading workshops at a high corporate level in Xerox. And I told her that this might be a good, it was the sort of the learning forum or something, I forget what it was called. And I suggested that might be a book that she would never have thought of, and that she might try it. And she read the book and she said, "Oh my gosh, this thing reads like a river." So, so I think that's what I'm trying to say, long-winded, that you do write like a river, and it's sort of like, it's, you know, it's not the same no matter where you step in. Yet it's still the river, and unless you're willing to kind of go with it, you might get a little lost. So
yeah, that's nice. That's interesting. And you saying that makes me think of authors I really admire, like Anne Lamott, who writes about
Annie
writing.
Lamott,
And Richard Rohr, I think, does it very well. I Rami Shapiro, I really appreciate those authors who are able to really bring the whole of their messy humanity to the table.
Yes, the messy humanity. That's the thing. You do that so well. And you do that at the expense of yourself most of the time.
Well,
quite amazing.
I kind of blank out what I put in the books once it's in the books. It's just out there.
Well, then once you see it in writing, how does it feel? So, you know, to many people, like in the US and even possibly other countries, you know, that sort of mix of Buddhist priest and psychotherapist may seem a bit conflicted, sort of on this whole sort of realm of the messy humanity and the divine. I think to a lot of people, especially in the US, where psychotherapy is a little bit different than it is in the UK, because of the licensure and so forth, and it's structured in such a clinical and clinical, you know, qualifications. I think the thought of a psychotherapist and a Buddhist priest might seem bizarre to people in our country and maybe other countries. So, you know, in episode 23, the one before this one, I talked with Greg Creech about Buddhist psychology, because the master of Japanese psychology, which was a wonderful time with him. But can you talk to us a bit about being both a Buddhist priest, and you sort of touched on it, but maybe you come up with more, Buddhist priest and psychotherapist. And so for you, what makes it compatible? It might be the divine. And what is the driving influence for you serving in both of those roles?
Yeah, great question. So I became a psychotherapist before I became a Buddhist. I was an atheist when I became a psychotherapist.
Which sounds more normal for most people's head, I think.
As a Pureland Buddhist, I've come a long way from that. But,
you sure have.
So originally, I think psychotherapy was just a way of helping people discover their truth, I guess, and speak it, helping people to come into relationship and begin to notice with me what happens for them in relationship with others, with the world. And I did the Buddhist psychotherapy training with Dharma Vidya, with David Brazier, and that influence that was hugely helpful in terms of personal transformation. But probably the biggest thing that I incorporated after that training was Gisho Saiko's model of the therapist, the client basically being someone who's low on faith, and the therapist being someone who has more faith. And the client comes to the therapist and borrows their faith and sits with them and soaks some of that up and finds their own again and leaves.
And leaves.
That's the kind of the end point. So that model really resonated with me. That way of thinking about what therapy is. And I think that still is probably the easiest way of speaking about the link between my work in my religious role and my work in a role of secular healing, I guess, is that I am grounded in my faith, and that allows me to be present with clients who have lost that sense of feeling held by something. And within that space, it's possible for those parts of them to emerge in a way that's safe.
That's so Pureland, and we're going to go into this more, but for those, because I'm sure if not more than half of the people who listen to me could never have heard of Pureland Buddhism, or if they did, they may have a really strange impression of it. So
it is a bit strange, to be honest.
I think those of us who follow it maybe are a bit strange. Maybe that's how
we can only speak for ourselves. Others can self-identify.
I don't know. I have this sense of my listeners, but my audience grows, so I don't quite know who my listeners are. But I have this sense of my listeners from the beginning as being way more secular, because that was the sort of the hook based on the name of the podcast. So I always try to explain things, probably deeper than my guest would like to go.
I'm really with you on that, because I think that's something I'm glad you've said that, because it's really important to me that if we use language that can be a bit of a trigger for people, like the F word, faith.
We're going to get into that. I've got that targeted.
I think it's helpful,
and it's not the F word that people think we're talking about. It's helpful
to do a little bit of translation around that, so as not to exclude people who don't feel that we're speaking about their experience.
Absolutely.
Because my experience of faith is that it's doesn't have to involve the Buddha at all. It's a steadiness. It's a sense of things being okay, even though I don't know what's going to happen. Those kinds of things. For me, that is what faith means. So
that's So let's get into. This is a great opening. We'll go into faith later. I think we'll get a little more depth of, to plumb here. But let's talk about Pureland Buddhism, since your book is, titled Coming Home, Refuge in Pureland Buddhism, and sort of a primer or intro to Pureland Buddhism. You guys had another book about that too, but we'll talk about that later. So in the West, like I said, or I hinted at, I believe it may be both the most invisible and the most misunderstood, if it is visible, of the Buddhist paths. Zen and Tibetan Buddhism here in the West are very well known. But the practices involving Amida, Amitabha, the Buddha of infinite light, or however you want to term it, have been, although prevalent in East Asia and maybe widespread even in Southeast Asia and some in Tibet, because they also practice the Visualization Sutra, and they do have practices around Amitabha in Poa and so forth. So that, it is there, but I still think it's really not, widespread knowledge. So I'm going to hit you with another toughie. It's a two-part question. Okay. First, how did you find Pureland Buddhism? Or maybe how did it find you? That's been my best question, because most of us I interview on this show seem to answer that way. And next, how would you describe it as a priest and a practitioner?
Okay. So how did it find me? As I mentioned earlier, I grew up an atheist. I'm a very self-sufficient, capable, confident, getting things done kind of person. So I've always been very, that was my security, came from being able to look after myself and to decide I was going to do things and do them. And that worked pretty well for me for a long time. And then I was in a relationship with an alcoholic, and that pushed me to the limits of my self-sufficiency and my ability to handle things. And I found myself in a 12-step group for people who were in relationship with alcoholics. At that point, I started noticing that the people in the room who were talking had something that I didn't have, and I really didn't know what it was, but I liked it and I wanted it. They were very, they were happy. Some of their lives were absolute, chaos and horrible things happening, but they were laughing, they were happy, they were honest about themselves, they were humble, and they talked about God a lot. They talked about higher power a lot. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't know what I was doing, and I decided to begin to trust that they might know something I didn't. And I was taught a lot by my first sponsor, who was also she wasn't Christian, but she used the word God quite happily. She said that she used to hate the word God. And that made me feel better. That made me feel kind of more okay, and she just showed me that the most important, that the wisdom that really changed her came from a spiritual place, I guess, and that wasn't head knowledge. That was heart, body, soul kind of knowledge. Mm-hmm. And she somehow helped me to open my own heart to that knowledge that I hadn't let in before. Mm-hmm. And that was the beginning. And then, fast forward, we'll be here a long time, to a time when I was ready to leave that relationship, and I was looking for a therapy training, and I typed Buddhist therapy into Google, and what came up was the house in Narborough where Dharma Vidya, David Brazier, used to live with his ex-wife Caroline Brazier, and they both used to run a training program for Buddhist psychotherapists, and they are Pureland Buddhists. So I went to the training, and I was already interested in Buddhism, but probably more from a kind of a secular kind of, I liked the idea of it as a system of being in the world, kind of more of the same of what I was doing, sort of self-development techniques. Mm. I went to their services, which they ran, and thought they were really strange. Walk around the Buddha chanting and and lots of strange words, and I just thought it was really odd. And there was something about the people who went to the services that I recognized from those people in the 12-step group, that they had something and I wanted it. And so I just kept going to the services, and I kept learning, and I kept, my skeptical part came along with me for a long time, and slowly relaxed. And I was grabbed by Amida. I was grabbed by whatever it is that we're in relationship with.
And do you, as a practitioner and a priest, do you see those roles as different, or do you see them more like, like what you said about psychotherapy, is that you're there as a model of having faith, and those who need it can borrow it, or learn from it? Or do you see those? I mean, that's a kind of a, it's a complex question, and I'm not sure even I'm getting the grip of it here, but I have an idea. I have something in my mind that, I've always thought that, practitioners in the Bright Dawn School of Oneness Buddhism, Reverend Koyo Kabose always stretches that those of us as teachers, our goal is to strive to be perfect students, which I love. I wonder how you see that, priest/practitioner.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that as a priest, there are some different roles and responsibilities that are part of the kind of the job description. So when I'm being a practitioner, I just get to really share, and I get to just, there might be stuff I want to express. I just express it, whatever. When I'm in the role of priest, I'm aware that people need me be.
Right.
I'm standing in for something, but I'm just showing people some of me, I guess.
Yeah. So it's that liturgical part, right? It's the liturgical.
Not just the liturgical part. So I'll also be Satya, but you know, just as an example, if I'm being a practitioner, I might, you know, if I'm in a sharing circle, I might sob about something. If I'm the priest,
You won't do that.
I'm not. I might well up, share some emotion, but I'm not going to completely break down. And it depends on who's in the circle. But
absolutely.
I've got an extra set of responsibilities when I'm in that role as priest, and I only see that role as I'm the one who happens to be wearing the robe. You know, that anyone in the room could play that role, but there's a whole set of expectations and responsibilities, a bit like being a mom, I guess, but you know, different.
Well, it's a bit like being anything that, you know, we put on all these, even though we're trying to get rid of that self-identification as Buddhist, right? We put on all these different, you know, play these different parts. Yeah. And you know, when you're a mom, you can't fall apart. And when you're, you know,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, it depends on your children and how old they are and what's going on in the past and all that kind of stuff.
Person, place, and time.
We're making those judgments, which we wouldn't be making if we were out with our friends or whatever.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's all the same. I'm just Satya wherever I go. So I'm conscious of having different hats on with different people at different times.
That's cool. Another two-part
question.
Yes, it did. No, it totally did. And here's another two-part question. And then I promise I'll stop with these two-parters, but you're doing
I don't think we got to the second part of the last one, but never mind.
Yeah, you did. How would you describe
what is Pureland Buddhism?
Oh, yeah, you're right. You're doing better than me. Because I said, what did you know, what is Pureland Buddhism? Well, you can do that here because my next question can kind of lead into that, okay? Because I was going to say, can you say more about the practice of the Nembutsu, which is the practice, one of the main practice, if not the main practice, but it's one of the practices of Pureland Buddhism. It's for those of the you're going to tell them more, but I'm just going to give a sneak peek. Saying the name of Amida Buddha is the Nembutsu. We're actually just saying the name of Amida Buddha, expressed in a 6-syllable, typically Japanese phraseology, Namo Amida Buddha, or Sanskrit is Namo Amitabha Buddha, and there's all different ways, Korean and Chinese and so forth. And you guys do it a little differently. Again, you take the Namu and make it Namo, and then you take the Su off of it and just do Namo Amida Bu, and that's sort of peculiar or particular to the Amida Order. So, can you say more about this practice? And then you can then talk about Pureland Buddhism in the process, and that will link us back to that question we forgot.
Yeah, so I won't give a whole history of Pureland Buddhism because people can go and look that up if they're interested. But the central practice for, as you say, for Pureland Buddhists is the Nembutsu. And Nembutsu means remembering the Buddha. And names are powerful. That when somebody says our name, we prick our ears up and we're like, "Ooh!" Or when someone says the word chocolate or the word, I don't know, slug. Names are powerful. They really conjure something of the object for us. So in Pureland Buddhism, the most powerful object is the Buddha, and the most powerful name is the Buddha's name. So one way of remembering the Buddha is to say the Buddha's name. And what I love about Pureland Buddhism is its simplicity, that it is available to anybody regardless of how much time they have available, how clever they are, how ethical their life is. Anybody can say Namo Amida Bu. And in saying the name, even if we don't understand what's happening, we're opening a little portal between us and the love and the compassion and the wisdom of the Buddha. And even if we don't really know what the Buddha is, it still works. You know, it's one of those mysterious things that it creates a connection. And different people, of course, in different religions do that in different ways. Pureland Buddhists do that by saying the name of the Buddha. So the services that we run here in the temple are actually quite complicated. They're Japanese, so we do lots of bowing and there's lots of ritual and we have liturgy and all that kind of stuff. But really, none of that is important. The only important thing is that we open our hearts to be influenced by the divine, or whatever word you want to use for that.
Can you then dig deeper into, for those who don't know, we said you know, they certainly can look it up, but this Amida might be throwing people off. People know the Buddha, right?
So when we say the Buddha, what people usually mean when we say the Buddha is Shakyamuni Buddha, who lived in India 2,500 years ago and became enlightened. Amida Buddha is a mythical Buddha who existed a long time before Shakyamuni Buddha, and Shakyamuni Buddha told the story of Amida to his attendant Ananda, and there are lots of elements of the story that are very similar. So Amida Buddha also began his life as a prince who was very sort of privileged and met an enlightened being and was very inspired by that and wanted to become enlightened himself, and then vowed that he would do that. He would perfect himself in order to help all living beings. And so there's a whole kind of mythical story, or you know, you can see it as mythical, you can see it as having actually happened, who knows, but it's really it's a way of describing a reality that people experience. So I would see all religious stories as ways of talking about things that are really difficult to talk about.
Yeah, and go ahead.
And exploring things that are difficult to talk about, or being inspired by things.
Exactly. What I was going to say, it's that story. It's what I think turned my head and made me more of a, well, there's another story too, and I'm going to tell later, and we're going to ask about another thing. But the story that in the sutra that we're referring to, there's a little part of the sutra, a little mini part, a little breakout part, and it's referred to as the Sambutsugay or Nembutsu. And it is the most beautiful thing in the world, in my opinion. Because what it's talking about, I think, in essence, is what you were describing about what you saw in the people in the 12-step program, and then again at Amida, this thing, this radiant face, right? And you wanted that. And the Sambutsugay is that story. Yes. It's a universal story. It'll seem all mythical and weirded out to people who are used to not reading stuff like that, especially if they read it in sort of the whole larger Pureland Sutra. It's really an amazing experience if you want to take the dive. But that part where you're inspired by something you see in someone's face that you admire. Yeah. It's like love, but better. It's a bigger.
That's lovely.
Right?
Yeah. Your radiant face.
Yeah, your radiant face. Yes.
Catching the first burst of morning light.
Brighter than the sun, right? Yeah. Yes, right. And
I'm sure we've got different translations, but we know the story.
Yeah, we know the story. I'm sure we have different translations. I've studied both translations because I studied it in Vow 22 with your
okay.
So but
I think that's spot on.
And you know, I think although this sounds all spiritual and mystical and woo-woo for somebody who's coming at it from a secular perspective, this is no different than admiring someone and trying to be more like them, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What
Absolutely.
and for the better of yourself, and that
Absolutely.
is kind of catching. I think
It's infectious.
Brazier Sensei says, Amida catches you or something like that. I think
Mhm.
he uses a phrase. I can't remember it exactly, but I love it. Well, I forget. Does he use something like that? Yeah. You're caught by Amida or something like
Yeah. Yeah.
that. But as some listeners probably don't know, there's a pluralism within Pureland thought and practice, just like there is within, everybody thinks there's like one Buddhism. Like I did this whole podcast on what does Buddhism say about, and the answer was maybe, because because really there are so many lineages, schools, traditions, and depending upon the culture, there is no one thing you can point to and say, okay, this is absolutely Buddhism and this is absolutely not. But just like Tibetan Buddhism with like 5 different schools, there are multiple schools within Pure Land thought and practice, including not just the followers of Honen, which is sort of what you follow, or the Jodo Shu, but the followers of Shinran, which is where I sort of got hooked, which is Jodo Shinsu. I don't think it's a huge difference. I think it's like very subtle and most people wouldn't even notice it. But it's all founded on, like, no matter how big of a jamoke you are, this is a thing you can do. Jamoke, I think, is an American term. You would
I love
call
it.
it something else. I don't know. But you can do this too, and it'll work for you.
Yeah.
So the Amida Order is a Pure Land or Jodo Shu based order, correct?
I think we'd probably say that we're influenced by Honen and Shinran.
Yeah, because you do talk about Shinran.
Yeah.
Too.
So that maybe a bit more Honen, but there's influences from they're both, great Pure Land teachers.
Yeah, great. And, as you know, I'm affiliated with the Bright Dawn Center of Oneness Buddhism, which is a non-sectarian presentation.
Yeah.
And so we don't say we're aligned with anything in particular.
Yeah,
but
we're not officially aligned with that. With
you aren't either, I know. Yeah, but it emphasizes more the individual spiritual growth, and we don't really have liturgy. We don't have priests. We're all just a bunch of bumblers, I guess. But it does have its origins in the broader Mahayana traditions, Japanese Mahayana traditions, of both Shin and Zen. So I come to this from a Shin Zen perspective. But I remember when I was first introduced to the Shin school of Pureland Buddhism, actually my first introduction was through the writings of your teacher, David Brazier. I was at a bookstore. This was I was practicing Tibetan Buddhism at the time, and actually in a Drikung Kagyu school here in it was a center right here in Rochester, and I practiced with them and was a member of their sangha and actually taught Buddhism basics there for a while. But I was in a bookstore back when we had bookstores, right? And I was in a bookstore, one of the bigger ones like Borders or Barnes and Nobles or something, and I was of course in the Buddhist section, and this book fell down, and it was The Feeling Buddha. Okay. And so I picked it up. I thought The Feeling Buddha. So I started looking through that. That book had a significant impact on me and was instrumental to my spiritual path. And it fell down at the same time I had started studying the larger Pure Land Sutra, because I was turned on to it by another British teacher, and I forget where it's from. I found a podcast, or they didn't call them podcasts then. I found some teaching then. And so I was all in this sort of thing that was happening to me. And I've always thought it was Amida, bopping me over the head. But it was instrumental to my spiritual path in a huge way. So what book or particular teaching has had that sort of smack you in the head influence on your life?
Good question. Wow. I don't tend to like Buddhist books. My first confession.
Well, I love that. That's cool.
There's obviously lots of wonderful teachers out there, but the books that have really changed me tend to be Christian books, because the Christian books are talking about something that I really recognize as a Pureland Buddhist.
Yes, Christian mysticism, right? Sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So mysticism actually across the board. So Rumi.
Right.
I think the mystical edges of all traditional religions I'm really drawn towards. So as an example, I'm just sitting by my bookshelf now. So this is one of my favorite books of all time, which is written by Quaker. I'm holding it up, but people can't see that, can they?
No, it isn't.
I'll read it as well.
Yes, please do.
So a testament of devotion by Thomas R. Kelly, which is just his description of being in connection with the divine.
Yeah.
There's also Brother Lawrence.
Richard Rohr. Yeah, you're hitting my favorites.
So those kind of writers, the 12-step, the big book of AA.
Mm-hmm.
Had and has a big effect on me, because basically does the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So
I guess that there was a Buddhist book that knocked me onto the Buddhist path, which was Zen Mind.
Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind.
Yeah. That was also very important.
Suzuki.
But what was more important than that actually was the autobiography of Suzuki Roshi.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. But yeah. That's
because then it felt like I really met him somehow.
Yeah, I like that.
So for me, I kind of fall in love with authors. I get head over heels with authors, and I just think I just fall completely in love with them, and I think they're just the best thing ever. And kind of enter into quite an intense relationship with them and learn, soak stuff up. And then I start, I get a bit cooler and realise that they're not perfect. But Gerald May, I've been reading a lot recently. He writes about addiction and grace, and I couldn't choose one, I think, is my short answer.
No, but that's really good, because it actually it hits me. I was still discovering my Buddhist self back. I toyed with Buddhism when I was a kid, and then left it. And long story short, when I came back to it, I came back to the Christian mystics in a big way, and like Meister Eckhart and the Desert Fathers and
Teresa of Avila.
Yeah, and they had a huge influence on me, and then and so there was always a concurrent path. So I still feel they're kind of always like right there. Yeah. Now, but it was the Feeling Buddha that first introduced me to that feeling, a truly felt sense of other power, which we really haven't talked about, or Tarigi, and something beyond myself, something bigger than me. And it reattached me to a faith that I saw in my mother, who was Christian, and that I never actually had, because I guess I was just too contradictory and intellectual or something, and what you do. But I didn't even know what other power was at the time. I just felt it in that book, the Feeling Buddha, and I think that's what captured me. But like Honen and Shinran, at the time I was struggling with right practices. Being in a Tibetan tradition, I was going through, and I don't know if you know anything about this, but I was going through Nundro, which is this intense practice of 100,000 prostrations and offerings, and you've probably heard it. And I was feeling overwhelmed, exhausted, and defeatist. And so I really identify with Honen and Shinran, because that's how I felt. And my Tibetan teacher, who is still my friend, and I had him on this series too, he seemed to think it was the Nundro that brought me to my right practice. It was doing the Nundro that brought it. So in other words, that was all self-power. That was Jiriki. And then the other power was Tariki. So this all, long story short, and we won't get into the other power and self-power unless you want to go there a little bit. but it leads me to the word refuge, which has a
Mm-hmm.
central place in your writing, in this book
Mm-hmm.
especially. And it's a key concept in that book, Coming Home. So what is refuge, Satya?
Mm. Well, I think it's one of those words that when we speak it, we know. I think people know what refuge is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that people also know that some refuges are better for us than others.
Mm.
That we all take refuge in things like television and trashy novels and gossiping and all kinds of things that food, which go from the scale of, you know, a bit too much chocolate all the way to heroin addiction and, you know, violence. And we all take refuge in order to feel safe. It's scary to be alive, and we do things and go places and manipulate the world in order to try and feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
And when we are seeking refuge, we're being driven by that kind of quivering, Ezra Beda talks about that kind of quivering restlessness, unsettled. And so refuge is anything that makes us feel safe. But Buddhists would say that there are only 3 refuges that are safe, that are permanent, and that they are a relationship with the Buddha, a relationship with the Buddha's teachings, Dharma, and a relationship with the community of Buddhists, Sangha. And that those 3 are the only refuges that are reliable. Everything else is impermanent, is unreliable, we might be able to get it to stick for a while if we work really hard and manipulate things, but there's an inevitability to the disintegration of all other refuge. And as Pureland Buddhists, we add, in our school, we add Pureland. We add Amida Buddha to that list of 3, and we also add the Pureland, which is the place where Amida lives, his field of influence, his or her field of influence. And so coming into refuge is coming into relationship with these 5 things.
And do you feel, in your personal experience as a practitioner, the pull of one of the 3 treasures more than the other?
It's a nice question. I feel an emotional kind of rush or whoosh more from Sangha. When I through people connect me to the Buddha quite beautifully. So I'll often connect with the Buddha through people or through nature, actually, which maybe we can include in Sangha somehow.
Yes,
the Sangha of the natural world. And I really love connecting with the Buddha.
Yeah. So at the beginning, we mentioned that Pureland Buddhism was understood, and we circled around the F word. And I think that's another concept we need to go back and clear up a little bit. You know, we talked at the beginning that it's nice to sort of introduce concepts, but take ones deeper that might have introduced some confusion. So I think the concept of refuge that we're talking about is sort of at the heart of the misunderstanding of Pureland Buddhism in some ways, because I think it is, even though we all have refuge, nobody, I don't think, thinks of it, a person who has no faith, is agnostic, an atheist, would think of the refuge we're talking about as blind faith or possibly even worship of the Buddha or a mystical Buddha figure like Amida. So when I speak with secular audiences or people who come to me who want to understand more about Buddhism, I typically use the word confidence in talking to the more secular audiences. But it leaves me cold in some ways, because I don't think faith has, I mean, confidence has that heart thing that I don't know how else to describe it other than the heart thing. Okay. So I also use the word faith. Now, when I get to know who I'm talking to, then I can just tell how far I can go one way or the other. But the thing about it is what I always try to explain to people and that is we all have faith. And like you said, we all take refuge in something. We all have faith in something. Like we have faith the sun's going to come up every morning, and that there's gravity keeping us from flying away into space, or that the solid earth will be under our feet when we step down. And that faith is just faith. It's not blind faith. I don't know why we always have to say blind faith. It's faith. And so to me, faith in Buddhism is the cornerstone of my life. The promises of Buddhism can be proved by doing Buddhism, right? But you have to sort of do it. You can't expect, we talk about like Amida Goddess and all that stuff, but you sort of have to start somewhere. You take that first step somehow. And, you know, you have to have some, first of all, belief or faith that if you take that first step, it's going to pay off, right? So that takes having someone or something, a teacher, a book or something that demonstrates its benefits. That's sort of like the Nembutsu again, something that shines at us and says, hey, this could work. So you said what it was for you in the beginning was being a part of their services when you were there learning psychotherapy. But what was, you know, and you said they had something. Oh, what was it that they had that gave you faith?
I think that when we get to this kind of area, it's where language starts failing.
Yes, absolutely. That's why I gave you the question.
I completely agree with what you just said, and I think that that's why it can be more helpful to just give our analytical brains, just ask them to step back for a little while and to just go with the experience and see it as an experiment. And if you meet someone and you kind of think, oh, this person is shiny and they seem to laugh a lot and enjoy life, and I wonder what it is that they've got, just hang out with them and you'll find out. But don't ask them to explain it, because that won't get you very far. Because this is beyond language. This is beyond it's beyond intellect.
It's that explaining that gets us into all that trouble, you know, where we start disagreeing with everybody, you know.
Absolutely. And we have, you know, was it Katagiri she said we have to say something, you know. We have to say something. I mean, I've just written a whole book, so
yes, and there's quite a few pages. I'm looking at it now and holding it up myself, and there's quite a few pages that talk about faith and those special things.
We have to try and say something. And the best way, I think, to investigate these things, if there is a little part of you that's kind of feeling curious, then just go along to something. Try and listen to the universe's whispering in your ear, and just become open to being led, like you were led when the book fell. I mean, it was quite a clear sign you got that the book fell on the floor in front of you, but it might not be that clear.
Well, the funny thing is, and whenever I tell this story, I actually just put it back. And then I started walking to get the book that I was originally looking for, and then my subconscious or whatever overrode my intellectual linear brain and said, you better look at that. So I went back to find it.
And that is a beautiful example of becoming open to other power, because one way of thinking about other power is it is something that is beyond us.
Right.
It's bigger than us. It knows better than we do, and oh my God, that is hard for me to take. It
is hard to take in, but boy, it's an experience that once you've had a taste of it, you want so much more. You get
such a relief. That is such a relief that I don't know everything and that I can't control the world.
Right. At some days it's a relief. Some days it really bugs me.
And that's why I think that Pureland Buddhism is such a hard sell in the West. Yeah. Because we have been brought up being told that the way to be happy is to control ourselves and to control our environment in order to get certain things. And actually my experience is that it's the opposite.
It is,
but absolutely. That's really hard to let go of if that's the way you've stayed safe all your life. So what we're saying to people, sorry to
go ahead. I love it.
What we say to people who are coming to the temple is basically, you're not as in control as you thought you were, and we're going to ask you to lean back into something that you don't even know if it exists or not.
Exactly. I use that symbol all the time, the metaphor of where you fall back into someone's arms, because that little practice you do with teams and stuff, which is so silly really after a while, because there's always going to be somebody there. But the big thing is when you don't know there's going to be somebody there, and that's what we're talking about, right?
And that's why for me religion or spiritual practice is such a personal thing that we can never presume to know what someone else's experience is. And it's so important that people go at their own pace, that they bring their skeptical part along. That part's also really welcome, and they just take little tiny steps and follow their curiosity.
I love that you said that, is like, go at your own pace and bring your skeptical parts. That's so wonderful, because
parts are very welcome.
Because people do ask a lot. I have this Facebook group that I launched off my podcast, and I know you're a Facebook person, so you know how this goes. Sometimes you get overwhelmed with a bunch of little questions, and you want to take a ton of time to answer in a proper way, but you don't have a ton of time, so you don't quite know how to answer. But so many times it's, how should I start? Practice. That's such a tough question. And I always say, sort of like you, just start where you feel called. Start where it like makes you feel all happy inside. Don't start where someone told you should.
Yeah, great.
Right.
Trust yourself. And sometimes you do need to go the uncomfortable. You do need to go into the uncomfortableness. So it's not always that it feels great, but that you need to somehow feel safe enough to do that.
Right, because you can't always just plunge into 20 minutes of meditation. That's what everybody thinks. And then everything then's going to be okay, and the world's going to open up, and whoops, I just hit my microphone. So, I'm gesturing wildly here. So, all right. So can you tell us another thing? And this is a plug for another one of your books, more about being just as you are, because this is a typical theme in Pureland Buddhism. You talk about it in here in this book, but also you have a whole book that you co-wrote with your husband Kaspa called Just As You Are, Buddhism for Foolish Beings. What does just as you are indicate?
So Amida Buddha, Buddha of infinite light, is known as being the Buddha of all acceptance. So when we say the name of Amida Buddha, we're connecting with a quality of a being who is able to see inside us and see exactly why we do the things we're doing, and really gets that the things that we do, however harmful they are to others, are driven by fear, are driven by greed, hate, and delusion. And Amida really feels for us, really gets it, and really feels for us, and accepts that that's how we are, and that's what we're doing. So that it's almost impossible to imagine, but it's an absence of judgment.
Yeah.
And the idea is that when we come into relationship with something that is not judging us, but feeling warm towards us, and I often see Amida with a kind of a wry smile. Oh, there she goes again, doing that thing that really.
And many of the statues of Amida have that.
Yeah,
that half smile.
Very fond. Dharma Vidya does a very good wry smile as well. That kind of that fond wry smile. But that when we come into that energy, when we bathe in that energy, we want to be better. We know that we're seen, and we know that we're getting it wrong, and we just want to be better. We just want to get it right. And that is much more healing than coming into relationship with something that says you shouldn't be doing that, or I don't like that you do, or you should do, you should be different.
So perfect. So perfect. It's like, yeah, that's why it really bothers me sometimes that people come to Buddhism, especially newcomers to Buddhism, come and they think of the, the freedom vows and the precepts, and they focus so much on what they're not supposed to do, and you shouldn't do that, and judging others for doing that they're missing the whole all the good stuff. That always bothers me. If there could
very human.
If there could
be good, and we want to get the top marks, we want to be the good Buddhist.
The achiever.
And Amida sees all that too. He sees that we're, some of that motivation for doing that stuff is really selfish.
I think in a lot of ways, most of it is, because we want to be the best Buddhist ever, right?
Yeah.
So
for me, that's a really important part of being a Pureland Buddhist, is that knowing on some level that I am accepted just as I am, even if I don't feel it very much.
Exactly. And that's what I wish that's why I wish Pureland was more in the mainstream, because I would make such a difference, I think, for people. If they
politicians would be able to kind of say, actually, I made a mistake there. Can I just go and change that?
Yeah, right.
Or they'd be able to say, oh yeah, she's really got a good point.
See, that's the thing. We, God forbid, we hold we hold everybody up as some sort of spectacle as perfection, and then when they blow it, we're all over them that they're not perfect. It's amazing if we could just all open up and say, okay, we're all a bunch of jerks, and someone loves us anyway, right?
Absolutely. And we try and love each other in that way, and we frequently and that's okay.
Now, we only have a little more time left. I don't know if you have like a couple minutes left, but I wanted to just mention mindful writing and the practice of small stones, because it was another of the things that attracted me to you as a teacher, if you will. I think it's a practice that so many of us could benefit from, especially in this sort of mindfulness culture where mindfulness is on every street corner, every book, everywhere. It's all about mindfulness. There's nothing wrong with that. I like it. I'm not criticizing it, but I think just listening and seeing and experiencing and then trying to get it written down in like 5 words or something is such a profound experience. To me, it's less like writing and more like spiritual practice. Can you say anything about that would, and I know you don't run those workshops anymore, so we'll have to give them a place to go, but hey, can you say anything about the small stones?
So small stones is, as you say, it's like Salima Hill said, it's the byproduct of paying proper attention to the world. So we pay proper attention, we open all our senses, and then we try and describe what we've experienced. I spoke to Dharmavidya about it last year, a couple of years ago. I said I had this theory that maybe small stones were Nembutsu, and he agreed. That they're a way of calling out, of reaching out to the world, and of the world reaching back or being met by the world. So it's just a little stitch, it's a little opening, it's a little channel between us in our small little sack of skin and everything, and it's so easy to reach a point where we've protected ourselves so much that we just not in touch with it anymore. And the little things we can do to just open ourselves up a little bit help us to connect back.
That's wonderful. You brought it even deeper and broader than I had even thought, beyond mindfulness and into the reaching out and being held and the greater connection. That's just the inner connection, if you will. That's,
Yeah.
major point of Buddhism, a major tenet of Buddhism, if you will. So that's wonderful. And it's a great place to end, because in this interconnected world, we're going to end with just a little small stone. That's what we're going to end with. So Satya, it was so wonderful for you to agree to be on this podcast today. I will put your books links on my website. I'll probably have to put Feeling Buddha up there, since I gave it such a big plug too, but I don't want to. So
yeah, it's the one that we recommend people read first if they're interested in Dharma Vijaya's writing.
Good. Yeah, definitely. And by the way, that was part of our curriculum in Bright Dawn. The Feeling Buddha. Yeah. And David Brazier Sensei talked to our class. So that's how I first connected.
We have some nice links.
Isn't that fun? Yeah.
We use the Gyome Kabose's son.
Bright Dawn?
We use the book sometimes in our circle.
The
running.
Oh, his A Bright Dawn, where he was talking about running by the lake.
I love that.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
It's lovely to share those.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely, it's great. It's beautiful. So thank you so much, Satya. It was a pleasure to have you here. And hopefully we can all talk again. And it'll be wonderful. Thank you again. Deep bow.
All you so much. It's a real privilege to have this conversation, and opens things up. I can feel like all these things we've talked about are all spinning around the room right now. Thank you.
That's it for today's episode. Thank you for joining me. As promised, I will post links to Satya's books, Coming Home, Refuge in Pureland Buddhism, and Just As You Are, Buddhism for Foolish Beings, and also Dharmavidya David Brazier's book, The Feeling Buddha, which we discussed in this episode. I will also post links to the Amida Mandala Buddhist Temple's website and Facebook group, where you can learn more about Pureland Buddhism, the Amida Order, and even join virtual practices. As always, thanks to everyone who listens, subscribes, rates, and reviews the podcast, comments on my website or the public Facebook group, and also, obviously, thank you so much for donating to help keep the content written, produced, and distributed. I'm still thinking of more ways for us to connect. Our private Facebook book study group is going right now, and it's been a wonderful experience with lots of sharing. So that initiative was a success. I hope to soon introduce a Zoom video hangout or Sangha, where we can discuss our practices and serve as supports to each other. Meanwhile, I'm hard at work on my book, Making Every Day Better, Everyday Buddhism Tips and Tricks, applying the Buddha's Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path to Everyday Life. I hope to have that published and available by early to midsummer, and I will keep you posted. So until next time, keep making your everydays better.